سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome to the 6th lecture in this course, Applied Linguistics. In our last lecture, we talked about the 4 types of 4 things that you need in order to carry on, or in order to have a successful or to achieve a successful communication. They were suggested by Delheims. The issue of possibility, the issue of feasibility. Today we are going to talk about the other 2, which are actually important in having a successful communication. The other 2 are going to be attestedness and appropriateness. We'll start with appropriateness, whether this word is appropriate, or this phrase or this sentence is appropriate to be used in this context or not. So here, this issue concerns the relationship of language or behavior to context. Is the language that I'm using either written or spoken, is it appropriate or not? This is my ultimate aim. This is my purpose, is to know that it is appropriate in this context, to make sure that it is appropriate. For example, calling a police officer darling, tickling them as they reprimand you, using slang or taboo words in a formal letter, or answering a mobile phone call during a funeral. These are not appropriate acts to do in any situation. So instead of being polite with a police officer, you say darling. No. You've got to use the appropriate language. You are using the language correctly. I mean, in terms of grammar. But in terms of appropriateness, no, you are not. Why? Because you are actually using the wrong language with the wrong person. Though it is correct in terms of grammar, but it is still needs another layer, which is appropriateness. We said possibility, feasibility, but now appropriateness is another important issue. The 4th issue, which is important in having a successful communication, is attestedness, i.e. whether something is done. For example, the phrase chips and fish. From one point of view, this is possible. Why? It does not break any grammar rule. Feasible. It is easily processed and readily understandable. And appropriate. It does not contravene any sensitive social convention. So here, we are actually having a big trouble. If you say, well, these are the only criteria that I want to achieve in order to have a successful communication, I mean the 3 already mentioned criteria. No. Possibility is important, but it is not the whole thing. Feasibility, possibility, appropriateness, all of these can be achieved, but I need a 4th issue. The 4th issue is going to complete the is going to make my meaning and the language I'm using better and appropriate. And here we are talking about attestedness. Here, nevertheless, it does not occur as frequently as fish and chips. If you start to do it like this, chips and fish, people are going to understand you. I'm not saying that they are not going to, and they are going to know that you mean fish and chips, but they are not going to be happy with this expression. So I've got to use the expression that it is used, which is the fish and chips. Here, if you have ever wondered about the word that is used frequently here in our discussion of appropriateness and our discussion of communicative approach, we used context very frequently. What do you mean by context? So all of the following, for example, might be involved in interpreting a real encounter: tone of voice, facial expression, the relationship between speakers, their age, sex, their social status, the time and place, and the degree to which speakers do or do not share the same cultural background. The whole thing is called context. The whole thing in which the conversation is going to take place is called context. And actually the things by which the meaning is communicated is called context. How my meaning is going to be communicated, my tone of voice, my facial expressions, the relationship between me and you, the age, my gender, my social status, the time and the place, the degree that to which I share the same or different background, cultural background, is going to affect this. This is called context, the whole thing. So this is the definition of context. These actually issues have to be present in a context where you are actually where the conversation is taking place, or a written text. In order to give a systematic description of context, applied linguistics has drawn upon and also developed discourse analysis. So this is, discourse analysis has been introduced in order to give a systematic approach in describing or to describe context. And discourse analysis is defined as the study of how stretches of language in context are perceived as meaningful and unified by their speakers, by their users. Three areas of study which contribute to this field are paralanguage, pragmatics, and genre studies. All of these are related to discourse analysis, which is a field in its own. And Fairclough is well known in this actually field, discourse analysis. So here we have paralanguage, the first issue. What do we mean by a paralanguage? When we speak, we do not only communicate through words. A good deal is conveyed by tone of voice, whether we shout or whisper, for example, and by the use of our bodies, whether we smile, wave our hands, touch people, make eye contact, and so on. This is called paralanguage. It is the language that is used beyond our use of words, or together with, we use words, but I'm using the words with expressions, moving my hands, smiling, touching, and whispering. I'm using my body to express my language, not just, this is called body language, and make eye contact. Pragmatics is the discipline which studies the language and procedures which enable people to understand each other's words. Its main concern is not the literal meaning, but what speakers intend to do with their words, and what it is which makes this intention clear. For example, if you say, how are you? You may ask about somebody else's health or someone's health, or you may greet you may greet him or her. So it has two meanings here. So I am either greeting this person or I'm asking about his health. This is what we mean by pragmatics. So the main concern is not the literal meaning, but what the speaker intends to do with the words, and what it is that makes this intention clear. How do you know that I meant to say this one or this idea? So here it is important to understand the deep structure of the or deep meaning, because we have got surface structure, deep structure, and actually this is a field also by its own. You can do master's degree in pragmatics, in discourse analysis, also in paralanguage, and even genre analysis. Genre here, the third issue in our lecture, which is actually part of discourse analysis, is a term defined by the applied linguist John Swales as a class of communicative events which share some set of communicative purposes. Communicative events share communicative purposes. Other possible examples of genre include conversations, consultations, lessons, emails, web pages, brochures, prayers, news bulletins, stories, and jokes. So here, which is in this term genre, I'm having a class of communicative events which share the same set of communicative purposes. I'm using this genre. For example, we have got so many genres and different genres. I mean, like for example, the argumentative genre, the narrative genre, the argumentative, in which you have an essay that has two opposing, you have an argument and you would like to support, for example, this argument, or you would like to, for example, say, well, I disagree with this argument. I do not actually, I do not support it, so I'm not favor of this thing or that thing. So you will try to argue, you give example, opposing arguments, and there is an idea and then you say, do you agree with it or not? Like, I mean, should people, for example, be allowed to smoke in public places? This is the kind of questions that you have in the IELTS test, for example. So people, for example, smoke in public places. Do you agree or not with this idea? Or should they be allowed or not? You don't just say, well, for example, yes, I agree. No, I don't agree. No, you've got to say something. You've got to have your argument. You support it by details. And then, and anyway, we don't want to get into details, but this is called the argumentative genre. We have the narrative genre, descriptive genre, and so on and so forth. We have a number of genres that are used for communicative purposes. So you have got a genre, a specific genre that you use for a specific purpose. I'm using an argumentative genre in order to refute an argument, to accept it, to accept this idea. But I cannot use a narrative genre in order to refute an argument. It is different. Or an argumentative genre to describe a house, for example. This is actually what we wanted to cover in this lecture. We talked about the third issue that we need in order to achieve a successful communication, which was the issue of appropriateness, and the fourth issue, which was the issue of attestedness. We talked about context and what do we mean by context. We talked about also discourse analysis, and which is a field by its own, and we said that there are three things that you need to know in order to understand discourse analysis: paralanguage, pragmatics, and we ended up with genre. This is what we wanted to cover in this lecture, and this is what we focused on actually in this book about the issues that Delheims actually suggested in order to have a successful communication. Next time we'll talk about other issues, inshallah. I wish you all the best, and I thank you very much for listening to this lecture. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.